The racing gods giveth and they taketh away. I can't believe what I've just listened to on the F1 Nation podcast with Martin Brundle. Absolute chaos, ladies and gents. Not 24 hours after condemning all things F1, Cameron F1 giving it the big moan that we don't get stakes, that everybody's turned away from F1. Nobody is going to watch going forward. That's what I was saying, wasn't it? And then Martin Brundle goes on and gives 60 minutes of gold with F1 Nation. Now, listen, many people talk bad about Martin Brundle, that he's last of a dying breed as far as the grid walks, that they're no longer appropriate, no longer fit for purpose, that the dichotomy, that the stark contrast between mainstream media and Formula One makes for car crash TV, pun intended. But I've always been a fan of Martin Brundle's grid walk. I like the yin and yang that is old school die hard F1 meets Bridgerton Abbey or whatever it's called, or Naomi Campbell, or a Pussycat Doll as an example. I like seeing the stark contrast. Meg Thee Stallion, of course, is probably the most recent, most viral example. And because of these examples, because Martin Brundle on the grid walk is so aloof, I think that's blockbuster TV. Hence why so many of Martin Brundle's grid walks go so viral of late. He is indeed, to quote Cameron F1, a reason and or a why to watch F1. How many of us have tuned in at the start of a Grand Prix to make sure that we can catch a Martin Brundle grid walk? He incentivises fans all around the world to watch, if not for the car crash TV, pun intended. But his appearance on the F1 Nation, listen, let me say at the outset, preface everything I'm about to say with this. Go and watch it if you haven't watched it already, because the insight, the level of honesty and transparency about the game that is F1, you can't replace it. There is no descriptor nor translator for that sort of stuff. It was incredible. He talks about everything: Verstappen, Hamilton, Newey, his own racing career, the danger, new F1 versus old F1, and we're going to dissect it all today because it was too good not to. Quintessential F1. I was riveted. You know, in 60 minutes feels like 5. It's like, what? This is just, I was like popcorn. It was incredible. So let's talk about it. Listen, first and foremost, so you want to be an F1 driver? You want to be an F1 driver? Well, know your history first, because Martin Brundle talks about a couple different accidents that could have killed him, for the avoidance of doubt. In a different time, maybe 10 years earlier, would have killed him. Most worthy of mention, 1994 Brazil, when one Jos Verstappen, father of Max, takes a turn and nearly decapitates Martin Brundle. The chaos, the bravery on display from drivers during this era is absolutely unparalleled. The danger on display, the risk, absolutely nothing compared to what today. You're having a laugh. Sanitised is what we're seeing. Risk has trended closer to zero than it ever has done in the past. And Martin Brundle speaks to this on a multitude of occasions. That dude was nearly decapitated. 94, a brilliant example. And then he gets into Detroit, the time when he overtook a fella and made second. Remember, Martin never quite won a Grand Prix, did he? That's the knock on Brundle, that he wasn't necessarily one of the greats, but I feel like as a commentator, he embraces that. He's open and honest about that each and every single time. Talks about a time when Ken Tyrrell chastised him for getting a bit too big for his boots, placing second at the Detroit Grand Prix. Brundle says, initially he was like, why am I being chastised? It's my best ever finish, second. And the dude is killing me. Why is he shouting at me for? But then the next Grand Prix weekend, what happened to Martin Brundle? He has the accident that would change his life forever, because the front portion goes a little wide at the chicane, hits a barrier. The front portion of the car is lost. So again, next time he hits the barrier, there is no cushioning between, no barrier even between him and the curb. He hits the barrier rather than the car. And his ankle is completely destroyed, left hanging from his leg. Brundle talks earnestly and openly, transparently about going to the hospital and having the nurse put a pin on his foot that he couldn't even feel. His foot, left foot, was completely numb. But he knew in order to continue his career that he would need a left foot. So when the nurse was saying to him, "Can you feel this pin?" he responded and lied, yeah, I can feel it. Until Dr. Sid, realised that he knew somebody that could literally affix his left ankle, his left foot back onto his leg. This is chaos, ladies and gents. Hearing Martin Brundle talk about this incident, I was just mind blown. He says he tried to get out the car afterwards and walk back to the pits on a foot that wasn't there, for Pete's sake. So you want to be an F1 driver? This is absolute chaos. Drive to Survive generation have no clue of the blood and guts, quite literally, that the older generation, that Brundle's generation and previous used to shed to just do what they love, to drive a car. And this sprung out, this jumped off the page at me as I was listening to this podcast. The enthusiasm for the sport, literally prepared to risk life and limb. I cannot fathom that. The sport, as long as I've been watching it, for the most part, post 1994, sans Antoine Hubert and Gilles Bianchi, has been sanitised, right? It's a completely different era, almost a completely different sporting endeavour that we're looking at. Hence why I was so fascinated, dialed in to Brundle. I couldn't put it down. I had work to do. But I was listening to all of those, every single second and syllable of Brundle, because it was so bloody insightful. Incredible, Alan, I'm telling you. 6 minutes late, though, you're a legend, Alan. Go and listen to it. I'm telling you, you will not begrudge back that 60 minutes. Absolutely incredible from Brundle. What else does this fella talk about? So the bravery, the accidents, 94 in Brazil being taken out by just Verstappen. And here's where it gets techie. He also got taken out by Senna in Formula Ford, by the way. Very similar incident to Monza 2021. Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. History in F1, they say, doesn't repeat, but oftentimes it rhymes. Very, very similar incident. Senna versus Schumacher. The interviewer asked him, so you were in a privileged position to test in the McLaren MP44 with one Ayrton Senna and to drive alongside Michael Schumacher. Talk to us about their common denominators. What did they have in common that made them both great drivers? Brundle takes the opposite stance and differentiates between the two, says that Senna drove from the heart, was super committed. A driver with that type of feel is once in a generation. Likens him to Verstappen and Hamilton even in his ability to find the grip wherever it is on the track, regardless of the weather conditions, levels. Schumacher, in stark contrast, this was Schumacher's weapon, right? His head, his ability to build and craft the team in his own image around him, his ability to extract 10/10ths of the car every single lap as if it was quali in the bloody race. But he says that Michael's strength was in his approach, in his mentality, in his ability to think his way through a circumstance. How can you not love that? A dude who drove alongside and competed against both Senna and Schumacher, speaking his truth. I just, honestly, I'm going to go, as soon as I come off here, I'm going to go back and listen to it again. I just can't believe it. Like, absolutely incredible listening to that stuff. Like, you can't buy that level of insight. The dude who drove alongside Ayrton 30 years post his death. Like, what are we? This is bonkers. Just inject it into my veins, and then this is where it gets techie. This is where it gets techie. The question was pitched to Martin Brundle, one of the goatiest broadcasters who's ever goated. The question was pitched at Brundle thus. Jomo, you're a legend, sir. Who's more important, Martin? The driver. They're talking about Adrian Newey, but who's more important, the driver or Adrian Newey? I thought the question was really interesting because I thought instead of the driver, the interviewer was going to pitch Max Verstappen or Adrian Newey. Brundle responds quickly and in earnest. Adrian Newey. Got it. You've got to take Adrian. If you're a team principal and you have the choice, you've got to take Adrian Newey because the driver is nothing without the car. And we know that. We've spoken about this a gazillion times. As a percentage of the whole, some aficionados say the car is anywhere between 70 to 80. The driver is 20, 30. And I agree with that. I think Martin's nailed it. But what he goes on to say after that, that's where it gets techie, ladies and gents. Oh my God. If you are, question, the interviewer asks Brundle. If it's Brundle GP, you are the team principal, CEO, you oversee all of the decision making. If it's Brundle GP and you have the option, who are you taking first? He says, you know what? This is what Brundle says. And yeah. Like, Lewis Hamilton fans, cover your ears. This is what Brundle responds. There are two names that I have to sign if I'm team principal, CEO, chairman of Brundle GP. Can you guess what two names he said? Oh, the humanity. Oh, the humanity. The first was, of course, Adrian Newey. Tick. That makes sense. The second, he said, was Max Verstappen. Oh, the humanity. Spare me, please. That is chaos. I don't hate it. Let me take off my Lewis Hamilton fanboy cap for a second and leverage a bit of objectivity. I don't hate it. Max Verstappen, 26, 27 years old. He's got a lot of runway in front of him, right? Can you make an argument that he's the best driver in the grid? Potentially. I would argue against that Lewis Hamilton's still up there, but he's much older, isn't he? 39 going on 40. 40-year-old drivers don't tend to win World Drivers' Championships in F1, particularly not in 2024. The only three to ever have done it, again, for the avoidance of doubt. Giuseppe Farina, 1950, Juan Manuel Fangio in 57, and Jack Brabham, I want to say, in 1968. Those are the only 40-year-old world champions in F1 ever. So statistics is a thing for you. If past is prologue, new old school, then Lewis is going to have to go some, right? Even with that Ferrari, a decent set of wheels underneath him. If he's to win this championship, he'll be doing something that nobody's done for 50 odd years. That's chaos. And you can argue that back in the day it was a different formula, right? So I say all that to say this. I don't hate Martin Brundle choosing as his two key personnel Adrian Newey and Max Verstappen. It pained me. I wished it. How much would I have loved it if he'd said Lewis Hamilton? It would have put a smile on my face. I can't even say the words without smiling. But I understand. You can absolutely make the case. And I think that will be controversial. Tomorrow, once everybody's listened to the podcast, that will be what makes headlines. Martin Brundle, per the title of this video, chooses Max Verstappen over Lewis Hamilton. Are we going to talk to this? Listen, they've both got very different strengths, right? And different weaknesses. Max Verstappen, the younger of the two, racecraft crazy, tyre management crazy. Is he still a hothead? Well, that remains to be seen. People will criticise his racecraft and say that he drives too hard, far too aggressive for the likes of a finessed Lewis Hamilton. And that, of course, is Lewis and has always been Lewis's strength. In addition to racecraft, tyre management, his mentality. His ability to be stoic in the face of danger, a la a Brazil 2021, is close between the two. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure. Can I disagree with Martin? I'll argue it. I will argue it each and every single day. Chat, I promise you. I would desperately want to take Lewis Hamilton over Max Verstappen in addition to Adrian Newey. But let me pitch this at you guys in the chat. You can only take two. Adrian Newey banked. So which one driver then are you taking? If you have the opportunity, you are team principal, CEO, chair of an F1 team. Adrian Newey is your first. Who's your second? What driver are you picking? Are you going to pick Verstappen, or are you going to lean into your Lewis Hamilton fanboy and pick Lewis? I don't know. At the ripe old age of 39, knowing what we know about 40-year-old drivers and that Formula One is a young man's game, how chaotic. And then this is something else that Brundle said that I've got to address. Only 2 duos, 7 times. Oh, new old school's going Lewis. I don't hate it. I don't hate it, new old school. And I want to be there with you. I really want to be right there with you. But if past is prologue, 40-year-old drivers don't tend to win championships very often. Last one, 1966. Do the maths, yeah? How 66? No, Jack Brabham. Oh my God. Long time ago, eh? 34. 58 years was the last time a 40-year-old champion. Last time we had a 40-year-old winner. That's bonkers. I don't know. But I digress. Go on then. Let me tell you about this as well. That was also very chaotic. But you guys need to hear this now. And this, by the way, is where we have to get techie. Change your tone of voice, Cameron, because this isn't jovial. Techie time. Martin talks about the danger of F1, right? And that today is not sanitized, but safer. Less risk, materially less risk on display. I mean, when was the last time we've had a fatality in F1, right? Jules Bianchi, it's been a while. And before then it was Senna. Do you know what I mean? Like, tangibly, the evidence speaks to the sport not just becoming more sanitized. That would be trivializing some of the safety leaps and bounds that the FI have made of late over the past 20, 30 years, particularly post Ayrton Senna's death. But Brundle speaks about, this is so chaotic. I need to be careful with my words, chat, because this is bonkers. A little grey skull, I'm sorry if it has to be Max, given age. Oh, little grey. I think it might have to be Max. We'll get back to that. Let me tell you about what Martin said when he was talking about life or death in F1 first. He spoke about a lot of people died in Martin Brundle's era, right? He spoke about the frequency with which he lost friends and colleagues. The interviewer asked him this question, and I think this question is clutch. Because of how many accidents you had, post Senna's passing and post Ratzenberger's passing, and after what happened to Michael, keep fighting Michael, by the way. Do you not feel guilty, Martin, that the racing gods didn't take you? And again, he contextualizes the question like World War II is a brilliant example, right? That many of those who came back felt guilty that they were the ones chosen, that fortune favoured them and not their friends who sadly perished on the battlefield, right, in the bloody trenches. Martin's response, super matter of fact. Have a guess what you think Martin said to that. Do you feel guilty, Martin Brundle, that the racing gods took your friends but not you? Martin Brundle responded, no, not at all. And it gets more chaotic. It gets more techie. Martin continues to say this. He goes, it's a very selfish endeavour to be an F1 driver. You've got to be selfish. He said, I didn't feel guilty. He said, on the contrary, when another racing driver would die, In my mind as a racing driver, I had one less person against whom to compete. What are we doing? So you want to be an F1 driver? That's the mentality. Listen, some people will recoil from that and it will make people retch, right? It's quite morbid, almost as if you were celebrating. I'm reaching there, but you know where I'm going with that. It's techie, this. It is techie, but it is the insight into an F1 driver's mindset of that era. And I think it's fascinating, unbelievable. He goes on to expand that it's different. War and F1 is different. F1 is a voluntary endeavour. You don't have to, there is no conscription in F1. You're not forced to fight. It is not war. We do it, Martin said, because we love it, despite the dangers and the material self-evident risks. But he continues, on the contrary, when one of my friends or rivals would perish, it was like one less person that I had to race against. How much chaos! That, ladies and gents, is, I could not believe that Martin Brundle said that. Lovable Martin, bloody Brundle grid walk. Megan Thee Stallion, have you got any raps for us today? Like, he presents as that dude, right? The huggable granddad that you can get some F1 knowledge from. And then he goes and says that. No, you have it wrong, Cameron, in your characterization of Martin Brundle. For that dude who thinks like that, or thought like that at least, during his tenure as an F1 racing driver, that dude is a killer. That dude, that to have that mentality and think like that, that makes me know I'm out. I would have loved to be an F1 driver, but in that time, I was nowhere near that mental, that attitude to be that cutthroat and that selfish, the embodiment of the word selfishness. I was nowhere near. There are only a few people that think and talk that way about F1 or anything even. That level of commit. They talk about Senna as being super committed, that was his gift. When Martin Brundle, notwithstanding the fact that he never won an F1 race, that Martin Brundle talks like that is mind-boggling. Honestly, little grey squirrel. Noel, Noel, I don't even know. This is bonkers. I'm talking, by the way, about the F1 Nation podcast that Martin Brundle uploaded today on YouTube. Had a listen to it and I was hooked. I was like, you know what? I could come in here and talk about more sprint races or bloody Alex Albon extending his contract. But I thought, you know what? Let's talk to my experience. 50 plus minutes of Martin Brundle just talking, giving you insight into the mindset of F1 drivers at that time when his friends and rivals were dying on a weekly. I just can't be, I don't know. When he looked back in the camera, I'm telling you, go back and watch this. It is mad. And again, 24 hours after I was talking about F1 needs to give me more reasons why to watch this. Again, sometimes the whys and the incentives don't come in the form that you expect, right? I was listening to this podcast. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I need to go back and listen to it and at least another 2-3 times. The peak point, the deal breaker or clincher even, when Martin got clutch. Tom Clarkson, I want to say, the interviewer, pitched at Martin Brundle. I'm going to reiterate this because it's the magic piece. Did you not feel guilty, Martin, that the racing gods spared you and took your friends and rivals in Ayrton Senna or Roland Ratzenberger, et al., Jim Clark, etc., etc.? Martin Brundle looked the interviewer right back in his face and said, no, full stop. In fact, when I turned up to the next race weekend, it was one less rival that I had. What are we doing? Listen, I don't know. Some people will hate him for it, but I'm looking at that and I'm like, holy smoke, this dude is cut from a different cloth. And I say all that to say this. The F1 drivers still today in 2024 are cut from they're different, right? Their fundamental constitution, the DNA, that runs through them is different to 99% of the population. There is a reason why there is only 20 of them currently on the grid. I just don't understand it. But that podcast via Martin Brundle, talking honestly and earnestly, helped me to remember, helped me to understand what the difference between them, 20 currently on the grid, and every F1 driver who's ever F1'd, and me, little old Cameron, Noddy accountant. That's what I am. We are cut from very different cloths. Well, I meant Noir. I will listen to their podcast. Not a fan of Martin, says Noir. I would like him to have the same energy for all the drivers in his analysis and commentary. Noir, you know what? I think I hear the criticism, and it's often leveraged or levelled at Brundle that he has an inherently British bias view, right? Noir, you know what it is? As somebody that you guys can see the rip behind me on my bloody green screen. I need to up the levels of the studio, man. It's not looking good at the moment. So to Noir's point about British bias, I think Martin absolutely has his favourites. But honestly, I think if you were to talk to Martin honestly, earnestly, I think Lewis Hamilton would be one of his favourites. Noir, go and check out the cinema that they did where they look back at all of like Lewis's victories at Monaco or whatever. I think he's got a lot of time for Lewis. And even when he set the joke, when he's talking about the God tier ones, so he mentions, he's talking about Senna and his ability to find grip on whatever part of the track, regardless of the weather, right? And he cites Jim Clark as well. And then he cites Max Verstappen, and he doesn't. They're about to move on to the next topic, and he has to throw Lewis's name in there because he understands that it would be disingenuous not to mention Lewis amongst the likes of Clark and Senna and Schumacher and Verstappen. They've all got that same. Do you know what I mean? As far as that innate touch and the ability to discover grip. To find it, to explore for it on areas of the track where most won't dare to go. You know what, Noir, I'll give Brundle some credit in that sense. Walter says Max no question. Is it Max no question though, Walter? I'm hearing you. My bias is desperately trying to argue against it, but I think to save a dying puppy. Oh no, I can't say it, Walter. I can't say it. It would be hard to argue against Max. I think, listen, here's what I will say about that argument. If we're going to have it today, I think that it's not fair. It's not fair on Lewis, not today, to argue 39, soon to be 40-year-old Lewis against 26-year-old Max Verstappen. That's not a fair test. I think you want to leverage what you want to take, though, if you want to make it a fair argument and do apples versus apples. Is how about we take 2014 Lewis? That's then you've got a conversation, right? 2014 Lewis at like 30 years old in his prime. Oh, that's a conversation then. I think we can all. I think if we're all being super honest. No, you know what? I'm not gonna do it. He used to have some bias, says little grey squirrel. He managed some of them. It was a good shout, little grey squirrel. As far as Martin Brundle, he managed David Coulthard, didn't he? In the past. Who else did he manage? I want to say he managed Anthony Davidson as well, but I'm guessing with that. Don't quote me. Toto Wolff chose Max over Lewis. Eddie, did he chose Max? I don't think he. I think he wanted Max to join Mercedes, that's for sure. But I think ultimately, Eddie, Toto Wolff probably rused the fact that he didn't choose Max over Nico, particularly since Nico left shortly thereafter, right? Retired from the game in 2006. Had Toto known that Nico was going to retire in 2016, I'm convinced he would have given Max Verstappen that seat. And I think that's his biggest regret to date, if we're being honest. Mazza. Max needed his teammate to battle life and death to protect him, and race director to rig the championship. Oh, Mazza. Deciding race because he couldn't beat a 37-year-old Lewis Hamilton, let alone a younger version of him. Are we talking Abu Dhabi in 2021 today? Is that where we're going with this? Apparently Daniel says you pretend Lewis is washed. Do I pretend Lewis is washed, Daniel, really? He's not. And 2014 Lewis isn't necessarily faster than present day Lewis. We don't know. Daniel, the honest answer to that question is we don't know. It's all speculation, and barbershop talk is the truth. You pretend that Lewis is washed. Well, to say Lewis is washed would be an exaggeration. It's disingenuous. Lewis isn't washed, or at least we don't have evidence to that effect. Not just yet, at least. But I'm an accountant, Daniel. Allow me. A noddy accountant come F1 content creator. For me not to account for the fact that so few F1 drivers have ever won a world championship at 40 years old or older, which is what Lewis Hamilton will be by the time he gets in that Scuderia Ferrari car, will be disingenuous. That's the honest truth. Do you know what I mean? You understand where I'm coming from, Daniel? For once, I've got to put my confirmation bias to the side. Like, I will, let me tell you this about 2021, since we're talking. In sports, right? Listen, my crystal ball is as murky as the next man's, Daniel, or woman's. In 2021, when Abu Dhabi happened, I re-uploaded my bloody reaction to it. And as much sport as I've watched all my life, windows of opportunity are rare and infrequent, and they don't stay open for too long. I think Lewis has nailed it in winning 7 championships. I never thought that I'd see an F1 driver win 7 championships again in my lifetime like Schumacher has. But Abu Dhabi 21 and the circumstances around it, which we don't need to go into, controversy, polemic, like absolutely, but the way that happened, I couldn't help but feel in real time that my spidey senses were telling me that might be the last championship that Lewis Hamilton should have won. That's just the way I felt. That was my gut telling me that. Just the way it transpired, and Great Magic, and then it was Imola and Abu Dhabi, and like just the way that Brazil, I don't know. I just had a feeling at the time that it wouldn't get any better than that, any closer for Lewis between now and the end of his career, him being nearly 40 years old. That was just my honest reaction. Nawal says, Daniel, agree with you. We don't know. The truth is, Nawal, we don't know. It's all, but I am speculating heavily. But it's fun to do so, eh? The old barbershop talk is I don't know. It's I don't know. I get my kicks off of the barbershop talk each and every single time. I love it. Go on and let's have a look at some of your other comments. I'm going to start to do more of these, by the way. Just go back and forth. Sometimes I need to get a video out and it needs to I need for it to, one of those ones, it needs to be a cheeky 8-minuter. And I apologise for not engaging with you during those. Don't listen to him, Cam says. We're getting techie, aren't we? Proper barbershop stuff now. Interesting, says New Old School. Mate, I've always been a statistician. I can't even help. Brundle managed Jensen when he was teammates with Hamilton, says Sean. Brundle played a lot of dirty tricks to try and undermine Hamilton, but the cream always rises to the top. Maybe, Sean. I've not heard personally of any dirty tricks to undermine Lewis, but I mean, there's agenda there, isn't there? If you have another driver who's competing against Lewis in real time, then you kind of, I don't know, it's a zero-sum game. It would make sense if you kind of want Jensen or David Coulthard or whoever as the driver that you're managing to do better than Lewis. As Brundle said, Lewis would be better going back to F3 so he could have a chance of a put. How very dare you, Ian F1 expert. How very dare you put some respect on Lewis's name. Little Gray's going to have to run. You're a legend, Little Gray. Thank you so much. New old school. Age is but a number. Bean counter. I am a bean counter, new old school. I disagree that age is but a number, you know. I just don't think high level sports. Look, LeBron and Tom Brady are turning back the clock massively, but it's a matter of Father Time is undefeated, undisputed, right? It's a matter of if and not when. I'm not sure. I argue back and forth with Shez and Baxter about this all the time. If you're talking about peak Lewis Hamilton, are you going to tell me that Lewis is at his peak now at the age of 39 years old? That like a 30-year-old Lewis Hamilton wouldn't beat a 39-year-old Lewis Hamilton. I think if we couch it in those terms, it makes it easier to digest, right? I'm not talking about Lewis versus Max. I'm just talking about the story arc of Lewis's career. Is Lewis at his peak? Will he be at his peak, at the peak of his powers, at the age of 40 years old in 2024? That just sounds like that. Even as the words come out of my mouth, it just sounds like nonsense. How can I argue that Lewis is going to be at his peak? And then if we're extrapolating out, if we're having the conversation, I don't care about Lewis winning, like getting fifth in the championship. As a Lewis Hamilton fan, I care about Lewis winning. That's all I've ever been invested in. And to win, Lewis is going to have to beat Max Verstappen in a Red Bull, right? Max isn't getting anywhere. I'm trying to be as balanced as possible, but I'm truth saying. In order to beat Max Verstappen in that Red Bull, you might make the argument that Lewis might need to be at his best. Saw what happened in 2021. Abu Dhabi exclude. They went into let's sack off Abu Dhabi and pretend it didn't happen. They went into the final race level on points. Max Verstappen ahead on countback by virtue of having won more races. Max will have gotten better since Will Lewis. I don't know, maybe. Well, who knows, right? My crystal ball is as murky as the next person's, but I digress. Alan says Lewis has always been a top tier driver, as fast as 2017. Today, no age, better racecraft, no doubt. So Alan's saying that Lewis isn't faster but has better racecraft. I think much like I don't think we know that, Alan. I don't think there's evidence sufficient. 2021 happened and Lewis was incredible in 2021. Since, much like Max Verstappen reacting to adversity, I don't think we have a great enough sample size to prove either way. As far as Lewis still being at his peak or having fallen, I just think you need to see Lewis in a good car and then go against Max again, race by race, and see what happens. It is fun. Lewis will come swinging hard in 2.5. Here's how, I mean, he's going to have a car right and potentially Adrian Newey. So that'll be something different to anything that he's had over the past 36 months, at least. I do hope we get some real competition, and sooner rather than later. Me too, Noel. This harks back to my bloody diatribe yesterday that F1 at its best, there's nothing better, right? When you get, like, when it's 2021 or 90 foot, like when it's stakes and uncertainty, it's incredible. But sadly at the moment, and even Martin Brundle said, he was like, listen, I appreciate seeing Max in all his excellence each and every single race weekend, but if I had the choice, would I want to see Max pushed? Absolutely. I think you even do Max a disservice, right, by thinking that you've seen the best out of him when he's winning by 20 plus seconds. I know he said that he wants to win each and every single time, that in his own mind, to perfect a race weekend is to win by 20 seconds. Doesn't want another 2021, but I just think that's, I don't know, I shrug my shoulders at that. That's Max's inclination. Like Walter says, Max won 32 of the last 39 races. Oh, the humanity, Walter. Lots of folks in the chats here must have loved that. Oh, mate. I don't think have we ever seen that extent of dominance over that period of time? I don't think so. And sadly, that's why people are dying out. What a surprise. Lots of Max fans. I think Max has got loads of fans, Steve. I'll be honest with you. And good reason. You know what? I'll say this, Steve. I think the way that I view Max Verstappen fandom is thus. The Netherlands is not, it's not a massive country, right? And I think you see in other sports like football, Johan Cruyff, Ruud Gullit, Frank Rijkaard, like when these guys come up, smaller countries go to bat for their stars. Not dissimilar to Brazil a little bit different, but smaller countries, underdog countries, or countries at least, territories who view themselves as underdogs, go to bat hard for their sports stars, right? And Max Verstappen is no different. That Netherlands have one. They have a superstar in Max Verstappen. Whatever you want to say about his person, and when he gets in the car, mate, Mount Rushmore instantly of F1. Whatever you want to say, whoever you are a fan of, like, he's incredible. You don't believe me? Go and take a look at I always say this. Go and take a look at Brazil 2016. Oh. Take a look at the way that Max drives around the outside of Nico Rosberg going through turn 3 in the bloody wet. Are you having a laugh? How do you define peak? Oh, Noel, how do you define peak? So it's a blend of the physical and mental, right? I see where you're going there, Noel. The insinuation being that at 39, Lewis is probably mentally in his peak, but not maybe past his physical, so that mentally he's offsetting the physical. I don't know. I Noel, it's too techie for me now. It's Michael 100%. Everyone I know, NC Paddock. What are you saying, NC? Drop that in again, NC, without any swearing. NC Paddock. No one could find grip like Ayrton could. I really want to know what it is about Max and why that Martin picks Max over Hamilton. Why he's picking Max over Hamilton has everybody ballistic. The man has a right to like who he likes. So NC Paddock, it's a great comment, mate. Go and check out NC Paddock F1, goated YouTube channel each and every single time. I would counter Matthew. I don't think it's like from Martin's perspective, and this is where everybody, Martin, go back and listen to the podcast. Listen, for the avoidance of the doubt, those of you who are just tuning in, what I'm talking about here is the F1 Nation podcast with Martin Brundle. 40 to 50 minutes worth of F1 gold, hearing that dude talk about his experience as a racing driver, about Senna versus Schumacher, about Lewis versus Verstappen and Newt, like it's bonkers. I think if there's one thing that I can take from that, Matthew, is that Martin to the core is just a racing man. He's just a simple mind. He's a dude that wants to go racing. You know, he's driven like 68 different F1 cars. How old is that chap? 65. Still out here driving F1 cars. So when he's talking about Max and Lewis, he's not talking about I don't think he's talking about personality necessarily, apart from that one time when he interviewed Max on the grid and said, you know what, as much as if anybody I want to go and have a beer with, it would be Max Verstappen. 99% of the time when Brundle's talking about F1 drivers and characterising them, he's talking about their skill, their ability to find grip, how tactile and subtle they are with their inputs, both feet and hand, their dexterity, their depth of field, the size of their vision, and their ability to react in. That's what Martin's talking about, because leopards don't change their spot. And Martin is and will always be a racing driver's racing driver. He talks about, you know what, one thing that I've missed, you guys need to hear this. When he's talking about them sewing on his bloody left foot back to his leg, excuse the gruesomeness of it. They're on in. Remember, at the time it was clutch, right? Or even gears at the very least. So when you're on a clutch, you're either on or off, right? So your left foot is like a switch, as Martin Brundle describes it. But when they brought in, soon thereafter, when they brought in a left foot brake, then it's not on or off for your left foot. You need a sensitivity, right? You need to be able to gauge the travel and be dexterous to a certain extent when you're on the brake pedal. Martin didn't have that. He nearly lost his bloody foot. Had to lie to the nurse that was poking at his left foot to say that he can feel it when he couldn't. His foot was numb. Since that point, Martin never got back that dexterity requisite to drive a left foot or a car with the brake pedal on the left side. So he said that he always bloody struggled. That's the guy who we're dealing with in Martin Brundle. Continued to fight through all that in the early 90s when cars had a brake pedal on the bloody left that you had to use with your left foot. That's who Martin Brundle is, for crying out loud. So when he's talking about Lewis and Max, I don't think he's talking about personality, I'll be honest with you. New old school, nice one, Cameron, for the brilliant broadcast. You're a legend, honestly, mate. North London, thanks, new old school. Proper legend. Author Cam is the goat. You guys are legends, man. It's not slander, it's true. Lewis was robbed. Oh, the humanity, Steve, eh? Yeah. You know what? I tell you what, the robbed. Go on, let's talk about the robbed thing very quickly, 2021, as we round out. Was Lewis robbed? Here's what I will put. Let me put this back into the ether, Steve, and I don't want to get too techie because it's late. Did Michael Massey / the FIA rob Lewis Hamilton? Rob, I think, implies like malice, intent. Can any one of us on this stream verify Michael Massey or the FIA's malice or intent to rob / deprive Lewis Hamilton? Could that be? It could be true. It might be true. But who knows? Where is the evidence of that? Now, some people will talk about tenure and a pattern of behaviour in the most recent past, potentially. But like when you're leveraging robbed for me implies intent. And I think when you say robbed, if I put on my Max Verstappen fan cap for a second, Steve, when you say robbed, you do Max a disservice, because the truth is, as aggressive and as much of a line stepper as Max was in 2021, can any of us here say that dude wasn't stunningly brilliant, profoundly great all year in 2021? I can't. Let me put on my hand. I couldn't argue that. You remember the guy. Let me say this about Max. This is the two things happened in 2021. You'll have heard me talk about this. Intent, no, I agree with you, Steve. But when you say robbed, it sounds like the insinuation for me when we say robbed is of categoric intent, definitive intent, beyond reasonable doubt. And I'm not sure. I don't know. Just my 2 cents. Go on, and let me talk about Max very quickly. I'd never expected Max Verstappen to be able to push Lewis Hamilton that far in 2021. I just didn't think it was going to happen. And when I knew that we were dealing with something different, was in Silverstone and at Mexico. Silverstone is Lewis Hamilton's track. It favours him. The late braking, the fast high-speed turns, Maggots and Beckett's, cops, like it's Lewis Hamilton's territory, and I've never seen anyone in equal machinery be able to take it to Lewis Hamilton around there until, of course, 2021 Silverstone sprint race, where Max, in equal-ish machinery, probably a marginally quicker machine, just drove by and past Lewis, and I just couldn't believe it. I did a podcast at the time and I was like, listen, this dude, you know what I think Max Verstappen is? I think he's nearing the Matrix, and we're seeing him make his first jump on the back of Silverstone. And then, again, another thing that I never thought I'd ever see in my life is anybody fend off a charging Lewis Hamilton on fresher tyres towards the end of a Grand Prix. And what did we see at Mexico? What did we see? Exactly that. As if Brazil in 2016 wasn't evidence enough. Silverstone, not even the race Silverstone and the controversy, but the sprint race, I will never forget my disbelief. I just didn't understand what I saw. I never thought I would see that. And similarly, in Mexico, if you want to know the measure of the driver that is just Verstappen, you only need to go back and watch those two circumstances. If you know and you respect Lewis Hamilton as the driver that he is, for the accolades and the accomplishments that Sir Lewis Carl Davidson has achieved in the sport, then to see any other driver, take Max Verstappen out of it for a second, but to see any other driver do that in the sprint race in 2021 at Silverstone to Lewis Hamilton is incredible. And then similarly to fend off Lewis on older tyres at Mexico. Oh, you're having a flipping laugh. Like, what? Is it Mexico or Kyoto? I always get it twisted. I think it was Mexico. But I streamed it live and I just couldn't believe it. I thought, this is done. Lewis doesn't lose these ever. And he ended up second. And see, Paddock, you're too kind. I had a feeling he was talking about talent and skill. And I would say Max is the yin to Lewis's yang. They're that equal bar records. I think you've summarised it quite nicely there, and see, Paddock, I'll be honest. Menace, Max is no match for Lewis mentally. That's the problem. But how much Menace of F1 is, even if, let's assume that I'm not sure that's on the money, Menace, but let's assume for a second that you are on the money. How much of F1 is mental? I suppose when you're in a heat of battle and all right, Menace, let me pitch this at you. In 2021, some will say that towards the latter stages of the championship, Max didn't fare well. But over the course, it's a 22 race season, wasn't it? Over the course of the 22 races, 21 races even, excluding Abu Dhabi, Max at like 22, 23 years old. I mean, what are we doing? Like, do you know what I mean? He didn't do too badly, Menace, you know? Like in contact. And again, this is where people don't give him credit. If you rate Lewis Hamilton, anyone that's ever gone toe-to-toe with Lewis ever is worthy of praise, not least if you're like a 22, 23-year-old F1 driver who's never won a world championship now. Ian, thank you so much. So you're too kind. Need to see Lewis achieve his dream seed. Ian, mate, listen, I'm in. Seconded humongously. I would do anything, nearly anything, to see Lewis lift that 8th, man. But there's a lot. He's got a lot to do. 40 years old. Charles Leclerc in the same car. Adrian Newey is like. There's so many variables, so many events that need to transpire in order for that to happen. It is techie. I don't know. Here's hoping, Ian. I'm not sure. Jay says Max is not at that level. He's beyond that. Oh, Jay. Oh, the humanity. He's not a bad driver, Jay. Is he? He's all right. But you guys have been legends. Listen, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to run away and try and be a husband and a father for a little bit. It's been good. Oh, look at it. Macon's just dropped in. Macon, it must be genuine to remember the steering wheel functions. It's got to be mental hell. I don't know what you mean, Macon. Steering wheel function. Oh, as in like, yeah. But you see, and there's another thing. So George, you know when George had his bloody non-brake test with Fernando Alonso and he was looking down blatantly, like flipping no. What was he doing? How comes he hadn't memorised those? I don't think you'll catch Max Verstappen doing that anytime soon. I don't think you'll catch him looking down. I was watching him at the last Grand Prix when he was on the buttons and I didn't see his head move. And that's the level that you're dealing with a Max. And I suppose you'd expect Lewis if you discount bloody brake magic. 2021. See ya. Have a nice evening. Joanna, you're a legend. Sabrinsky, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to run. You guys have been legends. I'll see you at some point tomorrow, hopefully twice. For news and conversation. But go and watch that F1 Nation podcast, please. If you like F1, listen to Martin Brundle, understand a bit more about F1 in a bygone era and his approach to it. The length of F1 life is treated with short worth by the racing gods. And Martin Brundle speaks to that. Not only that, but his attitude towards death, that he was selfish in his endeavours during his time. So selfish even that when the racing gods would take one of his friends or colleagues, ultimately that did not perturb him. Indeed, he was encouraged, for that meant one less person to race against. Oh, the humanity. But I digress.